Hello and welcome. A photography assignment in the 1960s took him from New York to London, where he says he fell in love with the soft, romantic English light and never went back. Before long, celebrities, newsmakers and even royalty was lining up in front of his lens. This week on One on One, meet the internationally acclaimed photographer, David Montgomery. Brooklyn in New York was where he was born shortly before the Second World War and started pursuing his passion for photography. Soon after, David Montgomery started working closely with the award-winning photographer Lester Bookbinder, who took him under his wing. In fact, it was following Bookbinder on a trip to England at the start of the 1960s that introduced Montgomery to London in full swing. The dynamic British capital was to become his permanent home as he began to attract attention with his stylish portraits of the high-profile stars of the era. Before long, Montgomery's portfolio included anyone who was anyone, from the Beatles and the Rolling Stones to actors, politicians and royalty. In fact, one of his most high-profile assignments was a portrait of Queen Elizabeth II. As much as he still likes to take portraits, David Montgomery has found another calling as a teacher to a new generation of photographers. David, it's always a pleasure to talk with you.
Thank you.
You know, you're still doing so much. You keep yourself busy.
Yes.
You're taking photographs. You're teaching.
Yes.
Professor David
That's
Montgomery
right.
in London. And I wonder, after all this time, whether the craft still has the same appeal for you, or do you have to struggle to find something fresh in it?
Well, funny enough, no. Once you pick up the camera, it's magic. In fact, when I'm teaching in school, and last week we're teaching the kids about depth of field, and we had a plate of peanuts, Japanese biscuits, and I was just showing them, if you light it this way, it's going to look very nice, but if you light it this way, it'll really look magical and blah, blah, blah. And I just guessed everything. I didn't have a light meter, and when we were shooting digital, and I took the picture, and it came out better than I normally do professionally. And I really got excited, and they looked at me like I was crazy, but I really got excited, and I said, well, that's the magic of light, that you can have this truly magic. We were in a room, just a room with no daylight at all, and that I could make this magic, or not me, but any photographer could do it, and to pass it on to them. And then they really got excited, and they rushed in, about 10 of them, with their cameras and started doing the same thing. And I just stood there like a proud papa.
London has been your home for now,
yes,
about 4 decades or more.
1959.
Yeah, so in all that time, you know, you've adjusted to what was the soft English light that first romanced you when you came here. Hasn't the weather beaten it out of you yet?
It has. It has, but the problem also is we have a place in Florida, and then after about a week of that fabulous sunlight, I start getting, when am I going to go home? And when we get home, my son, who's 18, says to me, and it's raining out and windy, and he said, "This is fabulous, Dad. This is what I love."
Well, you were born in Brooklyn.
Born in Brooklyn.
In an area, essentially a Jewish neighborhood, very close to where Woody Allen and Barbra Streisand were growing up too.
Well, it was everything overlapped, because there was Jewish, Italian, Irish, and Scandinavian. And so there were borders, invisible borders, you know, all I know is I can tell you in Brooklyn, if a car had the Italian little sticker on the back, you knew never to fool around, because they had the real stuff in Brooklyn.
Were you happy? Was it a happy childhood?
Great,
Yeah.
I think. Yeah, it was good. It was good. It was very innocent, very innocent. I think we didn't have television, so it was radio and sport, which I never did.
You had spinal meningitis at 7, yeah?
I had spinal meningitis when I was 7, and I wasn't allowed really to do anything till I was about 12. Now, I don't know if that was my parents just being ultra, but so by the time I was able to go back with the boys, they were so far ahead of me athletic-wise that when you're young, you just close down. I didn't have any. I met somebody quite recently who had a son that I think had a similar thing to me, and she said to me, "Don't mind my son if he acts a bit strange." And I said, "Well, what does he do that's strange?" And she's told me several things, and it was everything, well, a lot that was like me, and it was like a bell going off. So I got in touch with the meningitis, whatever they're called, and I called them up, and all they did was send me forms on collecting money for charity and going on marathon walks.
Your parents were fairly wary, though, of anyone outside the Jewish community, and when you turned up with a Catholic best friend, I think they were a bit worried, weren't they?
Yeah, definitely. But, you know, I loved jazz and I loved music, and well, at school the orchestra was filled with all different kind of kids. There was no religion, and nobody talked about religion or color, except that you knew that the black kids could play better. And then I just moved into a society that I thought was pretty racially free. But the older folks weren't so generous.
Now, before I get on to that love of jazz that developed and the people you hung out with, let me ask you about the influences your parents had on you. Your father, I think there's a picture you cherish of your father with a camera around his neck.
Well, you have to remember that when this was going on, and I was small, there was no television, so there was only the radio and this magic box, the camera. And this camera recorded pictures, but it was, I remember there's a mark on the camera for infinity, which looks like a sideways 8, and he explained to me that infinity means no ending. And at a young age, I was thinking, well, you know, how could that be? And that's kind of abstract thinking for then. But my bathroom was his dark room, so it always smelled of hypo. And it's like, you know, when you go into an artist studio that uses oil, either you like it or you don't like it. And I loved it. And I just always wanted to take pictures. I didn't have good cameras. I had a Kodak Brownie. And then when he finally went out to get me a camera, it didn't have a rangefinder on it. It was very primitive, and you had to guess the feet. In the long run, I can now tell you what 10 feet is and 15 feet without measuring it. But that was it. You know, just hard work, and I still love it.
Now, you took up jazz drumming. It was a real passion for you. Actually hung out with the black kids in the neighborhood because they were the ones who really appreciated it.
That's right. Well, I think I went to a football game. I had a crush on a cheerleader. That's how it started. I had a crush on a cheerleader. And so when I went to the football game, I was sitting as close as I could get to the cheerleaders. And that was where the drummers were for the marching band. And these guys were pounding away. And suddenly I thought, wow, this is good. So I came home and told my parents, I want to play drums. They nearly had a heart attack. And it was my grandparents, who were very straight-laced, said, we'll pay for your lessons. So that was how that started. And when I went to school, none of the white kids wanted to talk about jazz. I don't know what they wanted to talk about, Sandra Dee. And so we, you know, just...
So you hung out and you actually had like sleepovers in the black neighborhoods where the kids are...
I was the show white guy. And it was, I never really thought much about it. You know, I was very relaxed and they were relaxed. And there wasn't the kind of racism that there is now. More militant, I suppose, or God knows what it is.
I guess it was more clearly defined then.
It was very clear. Everything was clearly defined. What you were, what color you were, where you came from. You were short or tall, or parents were divorced, all sorts of terrible things like that. So when I hung out with my black friends, well, they weren't black then, they were Negroes, it was great. Except when I went into a club with them. I mean, I did stand out. But because I was with them, nobody I was cool.
Do you ever regret not pursuing that music career?
Well, yes and no. Playing is a wonderful thing, especially when you're with other musicians. And the drum is a rhythm instrument. So you're in a cohesive group. You're actually supposedly holding it all together. But when I started taking pictures or seeing photographs that were on paper and were sort of going to be there for all time, permanent, I went over, and musicians are never happy, and it's a hard life.
How hard was it for you to make the transition from America over to Britain? You're a young man, in your 20s.
Well, funny enough, when I came over here, it was really hard times. There were no yellow lines on the street. And you know what they say in life, timing is everything. And I did have hard times, and I printed my pictures, and people lent me their bathroom, and I used to come with my enlarger and print till 3 in the morning. But it all worked out, and there is a wonderful man called Jocelyn Stevens, who was the editor of he owned Queen magazine, and he gave me my start, and he advanced me money to buy my cameras, and it just seemed to roll. And I married an English girl, and I wasn't trying to be. I don't think you can be British or English. It's a difficult thing.
Well, David, I want to ask about some of those iconic photographs you've taken in just a moment. Don't go away. We're taking a short break here. We're back with more one-on-one in just a moment.